is a D6 generation Pip. Yeah, one of those dots on the side of a six-sided die. Yeah, a Pip, a short bit, little something. Yeah, about anything gaming related. Sometimes featuring Craig, sometimes featuring Russ. We'll see what's coming up today.
Howdy everyone, welcome to another Pip. It is the first November Pip of 2019. There'll be a second one shortly following this one. Good news, bad news, I am here alone again. Good news, Craig will be returning, coming up for air after his play this year, which just had its big weekend. And now that Thanksgiving is already here, he's pretty much wrapping up. So he'll be able to come back on the show more often. So there should be another Pip pretty close behind this one, featuring both of us. So excited to get that out to you guys. Also recording again while I'm in my commute. It's the best time to find a little time to spend with you guys. And last time I used the lavalier mic approach, and I got good feedback that the audio was pretty good. So I don't know what I'm talking about. Good feedback. I don't know why I'm talking like with that cadence this morning. It's a little weird. Anyway, so I think it's doing pretty well. Let me know again how the audio is holding up here, because I'll continue to do this this way, because it's easy for me to find some time to record. I am driving on the highway. Rest assured, though, with the lavalier mic, I am both hands on the wheel, fully attentive to the drive, not distracted in any way. Honestly, this is probably less distracting than regular, like listening to music or podcasts or audiobooks, because once in a while you're pausing it or changing where you are or whatever. So this is actually even less distracting. My hands are firmly at the correct driving positions of 9 and 3. So did you know that the recommended positions for your hands on your steering wheel have changed? When I was taught to drive, it was on 10 and 2 is where they said to hold the wheel, 10 and 2. And they said, don't do that anymore, because now the cars have airbags. That's how old I am. When the airbag deploys, you basically punch yourself in the face. So instead, they're recommending now you put your hands at 9 and 3, opposite sides of the wheel, and that way when the airbag deploys, your hands are just blown away from the wheel. Of course, your left hand smashes into the window and probably is maimed, but at least you don't punch yourself in the face. So I guess that's the plan. Anyway, I'm learning these things because both my daughters have done driver's ed. My oldest daughter got her license last year, and my youngest daughter is currently in the process. And so as a parent, you are subjected to all that stuff again, too. So there you have it. Anyway, that's your safety briefing for the morning. I hope you enjoy the flight. Now, I'd love to check with you guys, since it's just me. Long-time listeners will remember that from time to time, I would slip in a segment about video games into the show. And I'd love to share with you guys what I've been doing with video games lately. I have to say, it has been a wonderful year, best year in a long time, honestly, for RPGs. Now, the definition of digital RPGs, I should say. Analog RPGs as well. I mean, D&D is bigger than ever. The materials are awesome. It's spawned, again, a whole bunch of folks jumping in on the RPG bandwagon, so that's great. And I do wonder if the popularity and resurgence of Dungeons & Dragons has led to a resurgence and doubling down of RPGs and RPG-style mechanics in video games. In any case, I don't care why. I'm just happy it's happening. So this year, I'm a huge fan of really I like a broad spectrum of video games, and I love trying strange new things as well. So I have actually dabbled with Dead Stranding already. That is a weird game. I'd love to get Rafe to try it and get him on the show to talk about that, because it feels like a game that Rafe would like. But anyway, I'm not here to talk about Death Stranding. Although that's another kind of open world, kind of RPG style game that I'm talking about. So the ones I'm really top of mind for me, the games that have consumed most of my time in 2019 and a good chunk of 2018. So think about the last 12 months. So the 12 months from November 2018, which is when all the big games come out for the holiday season every year, and then November 2019. Think about all the RPG style / open world style games that have come out. So you've had a couple of really, I would argue, masterpieces of work. You had Red Dead Redemption 2, which arguably is a masterpiece. Now, it is RPG style in that there are some skills you can level up, but it is open world, but it's also more of an interactive movie. I mean, they're very light RPG elements, but I really enjoyed that style of game. And I've talked about Red Dead before, so I won't belabor that. But yeah, that come out. Then right on its heels, Assassin's Creed Odyssey came out, which honestly, if you were just to take all the hours I spent playing video games in 2019, Odyssey would be more than the rest probably put together, like 120 ridiculous hours, something like that. And, I don't spend a lot of time per week playing a video game. I usually spend an hour or two in the morning. I'm an early riser. I play a couple hours of video games, then I go to work. So for me to get 120 hours of video game done, it's like months and months of play. I do have splurges once in a while where I'll play all evening or I'll play on a Sunday afternoon. But for the most part, it's just little chunks of time. And Assassin's Creed Odyssey really got me in there. I loved exploring the world. I loved the skill system. It allowed for different fighting styles. I loved the way you could augment your weapons and collect your white weapons that would also augment your skills. So you could really pick a fighting style, like I'm going to suit my armor up and my weaponry to really triple down on assassin damage, which means I'm going to be a stealth player, or I'm going to really triple down on combat, or I'm going to really triple down on like potions and acid. And so Assassin's Creed was a really interesting way. Really felt like even though you couldn't customize your character, you could either play the male or the female lead, you could really double down on your fighting style, which led to some interesting moments and creative ways you get through situations. So I really liked it. Plus it had the really amazing world exploration. And I've always been a sucker for the Assassin's Creed premise. And what was interesting about Odyssey was that it's probably, without trying to share too many spoilers, but when you add all its DLC in, more about that in a second, when you add all its DLC in, it's probably the most explicative, if that's even a way to say this, the most explicative Assassin's Creed game to cover how the race, that the precursor race, the gods, if you will, sort of work, right? So it really fills out the Assassin's Creed universe in a really rewarding way to explain a lot of how all this comes together. And here's the thing. I know a lot of people get grumpy when games have DLC, and it's like, well, why didn't you put all that in the native game, especially when, like the Atlantis portion near the end, you really, really are teased you want to go play it, and yet you got to pay more. I get that you'd like the story to be completely self-contained for $60, but I have to wonder, like, as a miniature gamer, again, like, for $60 to get, like, 60 hours of gameplay, when there's other AAA titles that for $60 you get 10 hours of video game, like Gears of War and Halo and, Call of Duty. I know there's multiplayer that extends it for a long time, but in the end, the story itself is relatively short. To get 60 hours of stories and quests and dialogue and decision-making, and then to have... Oh, that's another thing Assassin's Creed did a pretty good job on. The latest version of Odyssey did a pretty good job of dialogue decision trees and mission decisions that would affect the game further. Now, not as much as some of the other games I'm going to describe today, but it did do a pretty good job of that. I liked what they did, which was really great. But I don't mind the DLC when you're talking about taking a game from 60 hours or 80 hours to 120. So the DLC on Assassin's Creed was nuts. So if you spent the initial $60 and then you spent the additional 20 for the season pass, you're spending $80 for like 120 hours. That's easily 2 video games worth of entertainment, arguably more, plus they stack. So, again, and when it's $50 to take a family of 4 to the movies nowadays for 2 hours of entertainment, and when you combine that with the fact that not only did I play it through, but my oldest daughter played it through to the end, my youngest daughter played it halfway through, it's hard to put a value on, it's hard to say that was low value. So I loved Odyssey. And it's easily the most hours. Well, I don't know if that's quite true, but it's definitely one of the games I put the most hours into. There were some older games when I was young and had plenty of more disposable time, but great time. That said, it's still not a true, it's really close to an RPG, especially with the decision making, but it's not like a true RPG with party management, right? So when you think about that, and you think about, the games that stand sort of tall in nostalgia around party management, not just the early ones from the SSI range, but you think in 2000s, like you think about Knights of the Old Republic, you think about the BioWare stuff like Mass Effect and Dragon Age, where you're managing a party, you're equipping your party, your members of your party have their own agendas, their own feelings, their own emotions. You can help them, you can dismiss them, all of that. You end up getting a little inter-party conflict. It definitely feels more like a tabletop RPG experience combined with the cinematic sort of thing. And really, we don't get those kinds of games very often. They're extremely rare, probably because they are hard to build, I'm guessing. And usually those games have moral decisions that require some really creative writing. And gamers who like those games are very demanding about, I want different endings based on what I do. I want my decisions to matter. I want the moral decisions to be tough and ambiguous and not black and white. And, that's you think about that, that's a hard game to write when you compare it to something that's a cinematic, great-looking game, but it's pretty much on rails like a Halo or Gears of War, or even a Red Dead Redemption, where there's a little bit of that. There is definitely the white hat, black hat thing in Red Dead, which I liked. But it wasn't really that morally ambiguous. It was more, do you want to be evil for the cheap, with all the challenges and rewards that provides, stealing, breaking the law, having lots of money, but being pursued? Or do you want to be good with all the challenges that provides, which is, yeah, you're not outside the law, no one's hunting you, but it's harder to find money and everything else, right? So that's neat, but you really want those morally ambiguous ones. The cool thing about 2019, and particularly this last few months, is we got dropped with two, I would argue, great games in this genre of party management and morally ambiguous RPG style games. The first one that came out, and you may have missed this one, I think I mentioned it as in passing on the show a couple times, but Greedfall. So Greedfall is by Spider Studios, and they're relatively a newcomer. Their last game came out only a couple years ago, and it did not do well, mostly due to being very buggy. Greedfall is a solid entry. There are some nuances to it. There are a few bugs to it. But both myself and both my daughters played it through to the end. My youngest daughter played the ending twice or three times, different spots in it to see what would happen. It's that good. It's that addicting, and the story is that compelling. And the reason it is it brings together all those things I described in sort of the nostalgic RPG games that a lot of us loved. It's back. So think about like a Dragon Age Origin style fantasy with magic RPG. So you're going to have a party, NPCs will join your party. You can then equip them, manage them. You don't choose their skills, but you can do relationship quests with them. I mean, you can actually have a relationship, but you can also just build relationships by doing them favors, helping them out, helping their moral dilemmas. That levels their relationship up with you, and when they get high enough, it unlocks buffs for you when they're with you in your party. So it's the classic, you've got, I forget exactly how many in Greedfall, I want to say 5 companions, but or maybe it's 6, but whenever you go out and start wandering around the world, you can bring 2 with you. So you have to choose who's going to wander with you. They're always with you. They're there with you in combat. They're there with you in dialogue. They'll have their own comments as you're wandering around. In the dialogue, they will help you. If you have them with you in certain situations, they'll give you insights. You can throw the dialogue to them if you're trying to get through. So what's also cool about Greedfall is there are tons of non-combat skills that open up dialogue options if you have them. Intimidation, bribery, the kind of stuff you'd expect in D&D. And what's cool about them, and I think, I want to say Dragon Age had this too a little bit, but this game really brings it out. You'll see the dialogue options grayed out if you don't have the skill. So you're like, oh man, if I had bribery, if I had blackmail, if I had intimidate or whatever, I could pick that one and really get there. But your companions can help, because your companion might be able to, if you have the right companion with you, it'll say, like, throw it over to this person, and they'll get in and handle the situation for you. So what's really cool about this game, what makes it unique, and not just a Dragon Age clone or a Mass Effect clone, my daughters kept comparing it to Skyrim with a party. So they're like, it's like Skyrim. It's not really, I'd say it's closer to Dragon Age in terms of how the gameplay works. What you can, combat is real time, but you can pause it for tactical options. But what's really interesting about it, the two things that really make it feel fresh and new. The first thing is they set it in the Renaissance era. So tricorn hats, black powder, there's still magic. And so you can choose to go, so you can definitely play that sort of like gun mage character, with the tricorn hat and the pistol. There's a whole skill set around, rifles and pistols, and skill trees there. There's skill trees around sword combat, long sword, two-handed weapon combat, polearm combat. Then there's I think 2 major branches of magic. So plenty you can do there. But the Renaissance feel definitely makes it, you definitely feel like you're walking around with the 3 Musketeers a lot of the time, which is really cool. So it's very different because, you don't see a lot of video games set in that era. With then throwing fantasy in, which is cool. So you got the fantasy going on there. Then the extra twist is they added a really interesting colonialism theme. So there's this island. It's populated by native inhabitants. They're really close to nature, and they've got really cool magic, but they're less technologically advanced. There are these giant, tree creatures and other animals that they can work with, and they're really close to. Meanwhile, there's bad things happening in sort of they're not European, but the European powers on the mainland. So the whole game takes place on this island, and you are asked a lot of really interesting and very morally ambiguous challenges around, do you side with the natives in these situations? Do you side with the different factions? There are 3 sort of colonial factions. So there's your own faction, which your character's part of. There's the faction with sort of the theology faction, and then there's sort of this science faction. And you're asked to balance those things out with the natives, but the natives are tribal. Not all the tribes get along. Not all the tribal leaders are the same. You are asked to decide where you're going to go there. Really, really interesting stuff. The end was very satisfying. There's some nice twists and turns along the way. Verily, why do I keep saying verily? Very morally ambiguous stuff, to the point where my youngest daughter was just loving it. As I mentioned, she played it. All 3 of us played it through. All 3 of us are watching each other's endings to see what we chose differently, to see what the scenes were differently, and how things worked out for us. I did something that really ended pretty dark in some ways, but also better in other ways. And my daughters could not believe the ending I chose, which was really fun. But so really great game. There's a couple bits of innovation too. I mentioned it's got its share of bugs. You can tell they didn't have a huge budget. It's a small studio. And so you could tell there were some corners cut, but it doesn't take away from the game, the storytelling, and the visuals are great. One of the things I would say that's pretty innovative here is when you are traveling between areas, instead of a load screen, you are put in this little, it almost looks like you're at a campsite while you're waiting for the next section to load. But while it's loading, you can craft, you can change your party members, you can re-equip people. There's even a little merchant, traveling merchant in the camp who will sell you. You can sell your gear and buy your gear. What a great way. A great, brilliant idea. I wish other games would copy this. In fact, in the AAA title I'm about to talk about next, they didn't do this, and I could feel it. So being able to travel, when you have a load screen, being able to re-equip yourself, go through your items, sell your junk, double check your loadout on your companions, maybe switch when companions are walking with you. They did it in a way that made sense. It wasn't weird. It didn't suspend your disbelief. It just felt like you were traveling, and it was really well done. I thought this was brilliant. So kudos to Spiders for that. Anyway, great game. Greedfall. If you haven't tried this, and you may not have because it's not really super well known, you owe it to yourself to check it out. It's on PlayStation, it's on Xbox, it's on PC. I think it's even on Switch. I'm not sure about the Switch one, but check for it. But anyway, Greedfall, I don't think you'll be disappointed. If you like BioWare style RPGs, you won't be disappointed. Speaking of BioWare style RPGs, another one just dropped, which I just finished also a couple weeks ago, and that is Outer Worlds. Now, by the way, I should say Greedfall and Outer Worlds both are not super long. So I want to say Greedfall was like 40 to 50 hours, which again is a nice meaty RPG. You know, it's not crazy long like Assassin's Creed, but it's pretty long. But then you get to Outer Worlds, which is much shorter. So Outer Worlds is going to come in at about 20 to 30 hours, depending on your play style and how much side quest you do. Okay, so a little bit shorter, but Outer Worlds also, so think, the best way to describe Outer Worlds from a theme point of view is think Mass Effect meets BioShock. Okay, so sort of like Ayn Rand, capitalist, crazy society, capitalism gone amok. Huge corporations have settled this new system, and corporations run everything. There's basically no government other than the corpse, and but it's got that BioShock sort of like over the top comedy. The vending machines, you're gonna feel a lot of that sort of feeling. So it's definitely got an art style to it, a very cartoony art style. But very much like Greedfall and Mass Effect, you have party members that will join you. You can manage them. You control their equipment. Again, you can't. You can choose perks they get as they progress, so you can do that. They also will buff your skills when they're with you. I will say that Outer Worlds did a great job with non-combat solutions. And so if you take the right skills like hacking and lockpicking and intimidate, those dialogue options are even stronger than they were in Greedfall. Probably the best I've ever seen done. And you can get around entire situations without firing a shot. In fact, there's a video online of a guy solving the entire game without ever killing anyone with his own two hands. So he gets all the way through Outer Worlds by basically, I wouldn't call it pacifism, because there are scenes where there are like boss fights you have to get past them, but there are techniques you can use, I don't want to spoil anything, to have other people, to have the enemies fight themselves. So he did that, but really cool, like non-combat skills that actually matter and allow you to get round combat. Both Greedfall and Outer Worlds both support, not to the level of Assassin's Creed has it, where you can literally kill people without anybody ever finding out, but both of them have passable stealth modes that allow you for, essentially the D&D equivalent of a nice backstrike before the combat starts. And if you're really good at it, you can even kill a couple people in the area before the combat starts rolling. I will say, Greedfall has sort of the problem that BioWare has, where combat is sort of in contained areas and you kind of know when you're in a combat region, whereas Outer Worlds did a really good job of, if you can see it, you can shoot it, and all the bad guys are on the map and they don't spawn and they're always there, and you can really create sort of tactical long-range situations, especially on planets. I want you to go underground and sort of the dungeons, less so a little bit, but that's more the nature of the dungeon layout than some kind of artificial spawning situation. But in any case, Outer Worlds did a really good job with that as well. Voice acting, phenomenal. All the characters, phenomenal. All your sidekicks. The other thing that's nice about it is it's very Western feeling in space, and it's clear and it's unambiguous, and the developers say this online, very, very, very inspired by Firefly, to the point where one of the first companions you meet is, and it's not a spoiler because she's like very early in the game, is clearly based on the Kaylee archetype from Firefly. She's a mechanic. She's got the same dialogue and sort of talking style of Kaylee. She's got the same outlook on the world, sort of rose-colored glasses as Kaylee. You find there's some deeper veins there, but for the most part, and your ship that you travel around in, very, very Mal, very Firefly, and you can kind of choose morally, are you sort of the scoundrel with a heart of gold, or are you the scoundrel who's a scoundrel as you play the game out? So again, really, really great visuals, great cartoony feel. It's wonderful to be playing a sci-fi game that's essentially a Firefly RPG, because it kind of feels like that most of the time, which is really wonderful. There's even points where when you get on your ship every once in a while, strange things are happening because the crew's doing stuff. And there's a scene where there's a bunch of cows in your cargo bay, just like there was in Firefly, and Mal's like, what's going on? Why there are cows on my goddamn ship? So, anywho, Great. I really like Outer Worlds as well. I will say this about it, though. It's by the company. It's by who the heck did it? It's by the guys who did Fallout Vegas, right? So it's not Bethesda, but it's a studio who's helped Bethesda in the past. And you can see the Fallout roots in the shooting style, the first-person perspective, the combat style. But unlike Fallout, you have a great companion system, and you have an even more morally ambiguous dialogue system. One thing we were a little disappointed in Outer Worlds, and I think it was only obvious because we just played Greedfall. Greedfall's ending and the moral ambiguity and the different ways the end can happen, much more satisfying and much more morally challenging than the end of Outer Worlds. We felt the end of Outer Worlds, there was a lot of little moral ambiguity along the way, and you definitely saw how your choices influenced the world in Outer Worlds. But in the end, my daughter played through all the endings possible, pretty much, and I watched her do it. I played through my favorite sort of way to do it. I got a pretty good happy ending-ish, but she did both the happy ending and the not-so-happy ending. But it's clear, like, there's no moral ambiguity. The not-so-happy ending was in her mind, was the wrong moral thing to do. So there's kind of a good ending and a bad ending. But like in Greedfall, there's an ending, and there's another ending, and there's another ending. But whether they're good or bad really depends on your perspective of who's right and wrong in the universe and how you feel, and you're second guessing yourself, which I just loved, right? So I haven't seen a game really pull that like Greedfall. So it's not a dig against Outer Worlds. We all enjoyed it. All three of us played it to completion. And again, my youngest daughter, she loves these kind of games. There are very few games my youngest daughter will play to completion. My oldest daughter, when she starts a game, she's kind of like, feels morally obligated to finish it. My youngest daughter can put them down. And honestly, most of the Assassin's Creed games, only been a couple she's finished. Red Dead Redemption, played it to the end. She loved it. And now both of these RPGs, Greedfall and Outer Worlds, she played to the end. In fact, she played the endings twice, and 3 times in some cases, to see all the different options. So what a great time. What a great year for RPG fans. Couldn't have been better. And then, as someone who really likes these kinds of games, and I know it's not fair, they're not the same real genre. I think it's wrong when you see a game like Greedfall or Outer Worlds or Mass Effect or Dragon Age, to compare those to Assassin's Creed or Red Dead is probably not right, because those are more like open world games that have RPG elements, whereas these are true RPGs with party management. So they're not really the same, but to me, those are my favorite. Both those genres are my favorites. So to have, right after I finished Outer Worlds, like literally the same week, to have the new Jedi Fallen Order game drop and have that be essentially Assassin's Creed, or maybe it's better to compare it to Tomb Raider or Uncharted, also fun games, but not really open worldy. So Jedi Fallen Order is, think Star Wars, right? Plus kind of open worldy like Assassin's Creed, right? Kinda. Plus add in, these elements of Tomb Raider and Uncharted, where you're solving puzzles. There's these giant, massive chambers of puzzle solving, and really, really highly cinematic, interactive, stellar movie moments that you get in Tomb Raider and Uncharted. So you merge all that together. What a fun little game. Plus, throw it in Star Wars, which I mentioned in one episode. I've gotten over my being over, too much Star Wars. I'm back into it. Loving Mandalorian. I'm really getting back into Star Wars Legion. And now having this game come out and be good and be a compelling story. The combat system, and the reason I compared it to Assassin's Creed a little bit is there's no stealth, really, none. But the way you progress your skills and which force powers you learn and what order you unlock them really, really, really affects your fighting style. And they did a phenomenal job of really making you feel like you're a Jedi. It's not tacked on. The combat system is extremely unique. It's funny coming off of a game like Outer Worlds, where you're literally walking through a room and scavenging everything you can find for more ammo and optimizing your weapons and doing mods all the time and trying to find the best piece of armor. You do that, you're kind of doing that in Assassin's Creed too. Meanwhile, in Jedi, you don't collect anything because all you freaking need is a lightsaber. I mean, the only collectibles are, there's little Cal, who's the main Jedi in the game, the main protagonist. His Jedi ability they added to the game, which is neat for backstory, is he can sense the history of an object he touches. So basically there's these little findables throughout the world that when Cal touches them, he hears the backstory, a little narrative. So you're learning about the world that way, and you're also learning about story elements of the game that way. And sometimes they're reminding him of his former Jedi powers because he's kind of during the Purge. It takes place, by the way, right after the Jedi Purge. So it's between, it's after the Clone Wars, the Empire is around now, and so you're running into, sort of a New Hope era stormtroopers, things like that. But you've got the Purge is still sort of happening, so it's kind of between 3 and 4 is what's going on here. I hope I'm right about that. I feel like I'm a little off, but that's right. So you're seeing the remnants of the Clone Wars, and you're seeing the Empire's floating around doing its thing. So, but what I love about the game is the storytelling elements, the Tomb Raider type stuff, the RPG, picking what powers. Like, I really, really, really think, which power am I going to take next? Do I need a little stronger attack? Do I need a little more stronger force meter? Do I need better, blaster deflecting? Also brilliant in this game is you have a little sidekick, a little droid called BB-1, and he's this little small droid, and he's so small he rides on your back. But throughout the game, you level his powers up. He's sort of like a little bit of comic relief. He provides a little dialogue for your character. Handle it very well. You travel around the galaxy in a little starship. The characters there are great. The character development there is great. There's some very light dialogue options, but there's no moral ambiguity. This isn't, Knights of the Old Republic type stuff where they do all that sort of thing. This is pretty much light open world because you go to different planets, and as you unlock powers, you're going to backtrack and go there again. Very Tomb Raider-ish, right? Where you can go back to previous areas, and once you've unlocked certain abilities, you can then find hidden things and other elements. And pro tip, the best tip I got about this game was that unlike other games where I like to overlevel, so I like to explore and level up, your primary Jedi powers unlock through the main story. So if you don't do the main story and hold off on the main story and keep doing side stuff, you'll find a lot of dead ends. But if you do a little bit more of the main story, you'll get that power you need. For example, there's areas where the bridge is bent up and you can't cross. But if you had unlocked Force Push, you could bend it down and cross the bridge and find more of the map to explore, which might just be a quick, story element or unlock, but it could lead to another whole area to check out. Those main powers are part of the main story. So you want to, what's neat about that is it does a good job of, you want to kind of spend some time over leveling and getting XP and trying to be more powerful for the main story, but you almost can't until you go do a little main story. So you have to balance it out, which kind of is an interesting way to do that. So again, I'm really enjoying that as well. Very AAA. I have to say, I wish Ken Whitehurst still did the score on the D6G, because I'd love to talk to him about the music in Jedi Fallen Order. The score is fantastic. The cinematics, the art style, it looks amazing on 4K HDR. I mean, like, really, really good stuff. So if you've got the system for it, it's on all the platforms. It's on PC, it's on Xbox, it's on PlayStation 4. But if you're running a 4 Pro, if you're running a 1X or a high-end PC, you're really going to see some amazing. The game really takes advantage of those systems. So anyway, I've rambled on long enough now, folks. Hope you found this helpful. Needless to say, it's been a great, great year for RPGs, and I've been enjoying my little game time in the morning before work to get in some quality gameplay. So check them out. Definitely check all those games out. And the best game you've never heard of is almost certainly Greedfall. So check all that stuff out. Great time to be an RPG player. Have a good one, and I'll talk to you later.
Achievement unlocked! You've made it to the end of another D6 Generation episode, the podcast whose humor has universally been acclaimed as not too horrible. Please let us know what you thought of the show by emailing us at info@thed6generation.com. If for some inexplicable reason you actually enjoyed this show, you can help others find out about it by leaving positive reviews on iTunes. Thanks for listening and happy gaming.